former President Trump filing an emergency appeal to the Supreme Court. He's asking the High Court to intervene in this fight over classified records seized at Mar-a-Lago. Our Caitlin Polantz joins me now with more. I mean, it's interesting, Caitlin. It's a pretty narrow request. I'm not going to ask you to get independent jurisdiction, but this is really technical stuff here. What's the big picture?
Well, Poppy, this really is a targeted effort, as you say, for Donald Trump to turn back the clock. He really wants to go back to that time period when Judge Aileen Cannon was controlling everything, all of the documents that were seized at Mar-a-Lago this summer, and that they were going to be reviewed by a special master, potentially Trump's legal team as well. What's at issue in this particular appeal is the 100 documents that are marked as classified that were found in all of those boxes that the FBI took out of Mar-a-Lago. And what Donald Trump's team is arguing is that right now, while the Justice Department is looking at them, the intelligence community is looking them to assess any national security risk, he's saying this is chaos, that there should be restored order here. And what that means to his team is that the special master should be able to preside over what happens with these 100 documents marked as classified. Essentially, they should get to look at them before the Justice Department goes through them and sees how much harm is being done here. He wants there to be transparency. That's another key piece of the argument. Now, the Justice Department, on their side, we haven't seen what their response is yet, Poppy, but we really do know that they are probably going to say there's no way that these documents are Trump's. They're marked as classified records, and it's not harming Donald Trump at this point in time for the Justice Department, the intelligence community, to be looking at them for possible national security leaks. What the harm really could be would be to the United States and the federal government.
Caitlin, can you just explain? So it is Justice Clarence Thomas who has purview over this initially, but that's because, you know, the 11th Circuit is assigned to him. That's what would happen. However, can you explain to people if he will be deciding alone or if a majority of the justices would decide if they take up this case?
Well, that remains to be seen. Right now, Justice Thomas is the person on the Supreme Court who is designated to oversee anything that comes up through the system out of Florida. So the 11th Circuit, he's the one that gets to review emergency actions like this from Trump's team. These sorts of situations, when they involve a former president, it often becomes something that the rest of the Supreme Court will decide whether or not they want to take. But they're going to have to make a really tough choice. Does the Supreme Court want to get involved in this stage? Do they believe that there was an appropriate appeal of Judge Cannon and what she was doing with the special master at this point in the process? Those are all questions that the Supreme Court is probably going to be looking at. And of course, we do know that there will be a response from the Justice Department in 1 week. Poppy?
That's right. All right, Caitlin Polantz, thanks for all the reporting. Let's talk more about this with Elliott Williams, CNN legal analyst, former federal prosecutor. Also, he served as Deputy Assistant Attorney General. Elliott, it's great to have you. And let's just get to the central question here. Let's assume, for argument's sake, that the Supreme Court says, okay, we're going to consider this. We'll take this up. Even if Trump were to win, does that fundamentally change what DOJ can do here with these documents?
At this stage, absolutely not, because this would not affect the Justice Department's ability to use the documents in their criminal investigation, which at this stage right now, that's what this is all about. Now, look, Poppy, there could be a day when somebody wins or loses here and takes the whole thing to the Supreme Court, the whole civil case we're looking at here. And yes, that may change the outcome pretty significantly. As of today, right now, no, nothing big changes, even if Trump wins here.
I do want to ask you, though, about a part of the argument Trump's lawyers are making to the Supreme Court that I think is interesting. So DOJ says, no, these classified documents can't go to the special master because that could harm national security. What Trump's lawyers are saying is, how can you make that argument while at the same time arguing you want to be able to use these documents to present to witnesses, to present to a grand jury? You know, how do you square the two? Do you think they have a, what do you think?
Yeah, well, sure. You know, there's nothing uncommon in the Justice Department. Look, I worked there for 6 years throughout my career. There's nothing uncommon in there being both national security and criminal justice interests in the same piece of evidence. And the mere fact that something might affect national security doesn't mean that prosecutors or grand juries couldn't see it. There are all kinds of laws and regulations and rules governing the security of that information, even when used in the criminal justice system. So it's a little bit cute to say that merely because a grand jury might see it, that somehow it's now a risk in national security. That's just not accurate.
If the Supreme Court agrees to take up this emergency request, they need, they have certain criteria they have to check off to grant a stay, and one of those criteria is that they agree that this could cause, quote, irreparable harm to the former president if they deny a stay. How high a bar is that?
Sorry. No, it's a pretty high bar. It's a few things. It's number one, a likelihood of success on the merits that they think he would win anyway, and two, irreparable harm. Now, what could be the irreparable harm here to an individual who doesn't have a personal property interest in these documents? These are, no matter what you think of the former president or anything like else, these are marked national security documents. They are not his personal property, so you can't really make the argument that by taking them away, he's harmed in some way that it would be if, for instance, it were a passport or, I don't know, a birth certificate or something like that. It's just not the same type of document.
Just finally, Elliot, if we look big picture, this is not the first time the former president has wanted to go to the Supreme Court. He's gone to the Supreme Court, and he's been frustrated, to say the least, at his lack of success with arguments before the court. Explain how this argument is different than what he's taken there before.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, when we think about the Supreme Court being a conservative court, it's on these social issues, hot button things, abortion, affirmative action, things like that. On these matters of tension between the branches of government, or should a president bend the knee, in effect, to the criminal justice system, he really hasn't done quite well. Number one, when there was a question of Congress having access to his tax records, he lost, and so on. So this is sort of a strange bedfellows case. It's not the kind of straightforward thing that might line up on political lines like we're used to.
Elliot Williams, thank you for making us all smarter, as you always do. We appreciate it.